Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the new time travel horror film, Until Dawn. For those of you that watch this channel regularly, you will know that this was on my most anticipated horror films of the year list, and it did not disappoint. So the film starts off with a group of friends that are on a trip that is coming to its end. They went on this trip because one of the characters, Clover, her sister went missing and she was having a really tough time with her mental health. She had attempted suicide twice earlier that year, and so the friends thought that this trip would help get her mind off of her sister, kind of help them all reconnect, and just be a really good distraction for her. So as the trip is coming to an end, Clover shows a picture of her sister to this guy at a gas station and asks if he'd seen her, and he points her in the direction of the nearest Eldritch location. No, but seriously, he points Clover and her friends in a certain direction, and as they go there, it's the middle of a rainstorm, and as soon as they get there, the rainstorm just stops. Although it continues going on the other side of the place where they've arrived. So I looked it up and it looks like it's called a virga in real life. I don't remember what term they used in the movie, but it was a really good comedic moment when one of the characters was like, I think it's called this, and the other one was like, yeah, that sounds made up. So I'm thinking that they actually did make it up. It was a really funny joke, and it was a really good way to kind of set up that this place is supernatural and of another world. So they go inside this house, and Nina signs her name in the guest book because why not? And apparently, I think that that's kind of what sort of sealed their fate and got them stuck in this time loop, is her signing the book. One of the other characters goes into another room and discovers there's a wall of missing people posters, but there's no dates, there's no names, it's just their pictures. It's very haunting. One of my favorite parts of the film. This movie has so many great, dark moments like that, where it's like it doesn't necessarily have to do with the plot, it's just really creepy atmosphere. I think they did a really good job with that. So they all end up dying pretty early on. This isn't really a spoiler because it is a time loop film, and the really cool hourglass is actually in the film. It's not just a promotional thing. I thought that was cool because I didn't know for sure. And the hourglass sort of resets itself and everything goes back to whenever they first entered the house. Nina is signing her name again. She looks down and realizes that there's two names, and all of them are able to retain their memories of what had happened in the first loop. So they all kind of just have this moment where they're like, oh fuck, I'm alive again. It's a really fun scene whenever they realize that everything has reset and that they're stuck in a time loop. I also really appreciate that one of the characters did what most of us would do in that situation and was like, let's get in the car and drive away from this place, and actually tried to do it. Like, a lot of times they'll make excuses or, you know, they'll come up with some silly reason why they can't at least try it. In this case, they actually tried it, and, you know, something kept them there, of course, but I really liked that because so often in films I'm yelling at the protagonist. I'm like, what are you doing? This is so stupid. And it makes it really hard to relate to any of the characters whenever they don't do what would arguably be the easiest escape plan possible. I don't want to go into too much more about, you know, what actually happens in the plot of this film, but I'll just say that I was really satisfied. To me, this film feels a lot like Silent Hill meets Happy Death Day, and you wouldn't think that that combination could work because Silent Hill is very creepy, very cosmic horror, eldritch locations and abominations, very serious, and then, you know, Happy Death Day is just sheer silliness and lunacy. But it does work, and there are some tonal shifts where, you know, one minute you'll be laughing at something silly or ridiculous a character did, and then a couple seconds later something is genuinely scary, or at least, you know, very surprising or gory. You know, there is a lot of tone shifts in this, but I was really on board with it and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I do want to talk for a minute about the magical cell phone. I told my dad whenever we were walking out of the theater, I was like, I really need a new phone. I want that guy's cell phone. The phone in the film that was able to defy the rules of time travel. There's a part in the film whenever they start losing their memories of how many loops have passed and what they did during those time loops. And so they pull out one of the characters' phones and he's been recording certain scenes during every time loop so they can figure out what they've already done, so as they're exploring this Eldritch location and trying to find a way to escape. And it's actually a really cool moment where the film shifts into found footage just for a minute, just for like literally about 60 seconds. It shows a series of scenes of them being killed in all these ways and finding different secrets. I thought it was a really successful use of the found footage trope. I don't think that it goes on long enough that it would put off anyone that doesn't like that trope, but for those of us that do like it in moderation, I thought that it was a really good use of the found footage trope. Now, as for why this phone seems to be the only thing unaffected by the time loop, that part was a little bit silly. Well, I take that back. There was also the guest book. The guest book is the only other thing where it's not affected by the time loop because when you sign your name, it keeps a record of every single one. But that almost kind of feels like it's part of the curse. Like, Nina can't help but write her name in the guest book. She doesn't actually have a choice, and it seems like that's part of what makes it, what makes it a loop. But the phone was something they brought from the outside world, so I'm like, why is that not affected by the loop? I don't know. I guess we could try to argue maybe anything that's organic material is affected by the time loop, but anything else is not. That's kind of like just something silly I made up. There's no evidence of that in the film. But yeah, it's a plot hole. But it's okay. I kind of feel like for this film, what they could have done is they could have just had a character make a joke about it, and I don't think anyone's even mentioned this that I've read on Reddit or anything. But like if they wanted to, they could have just had a character be like, what phone do you have? Or something like, what phone service do you have? As the character is showing them the footage that their phone managed to save from the time loops, I think that could have been funny. I mean, if you can't erase a plot hole, at least make a joke about it. In a film like this, I think that would have worked. Anyways, it's fine. It's not a big deal, but it did make me think that there is another way they could have done it that wouldn't have been a plot hole and that could have been really interesting. I think it would have been cool since, this is a slight spoiler, but there are a few things that change during the loop every time. Not going to get into the details, but I thought that was really cool. And I think it would have been cool if there had been certain things, like the guest book does stay the same. I mean, the names, there's an additional entry each time, but the book itself stays the same. It would have been cool if there had been certain objects that were always back where they were, while other things in the room changed. And maybe those objects are supposed to be things that the characters are intended to use along their journey as they're investigating, what this place is, what happened to the town, why is this an Eldritch location. The characters didn't get a whole lot of answers about what happened to this town, and that was okay. It's not like a mini series or something where they have a whole lot of time to dig into the history. But I think it would have been cool to see them using objects, maybe objects from the video game this is inspired by. I heard this wasn't a very close adaptation, but I still feel like they could have maybe brought some objects from the game that are important into the movie. And yeah, I think that if they wanted to have that trope of the found footage and them kind of figuring out what happened during those loops where they couldn't remember what happened, then it would have been cool if they had been able to record it using a camera that they found in that world. That's probably the only big thing that I think this film should have done differently. I know a lot of people have commented that they should have developed the relationship between Clover and her missing sister Melanie more. I felt like we got just enough. I did not want any more between them. I thought it was good enough. Like, I got the metaphor. I got that the time loop is kind of symbolic for being stuck in your grief, how you kind of relive the same day over and over. Some other things happen too that kind of strengthen that metaphor. But that's what I felt like the relationship was between those characters. It didn't feel like it's one of those movies that's all about the characters and it's character driven. I don't think it was even trying to be that kind of film. I liked the characters. I thought the characters were sufficient. They weren't super well developed. I didn't need them to be because it's not really about them. It's about this mystery that they've fallen into. Last thing I want to talk about is the gore. The gore in this film was great. It wasn't like excessive where it was just constantly in your face, but it had enough really good gory deaths that just literally made me squirm or just made me excited. Like, yeah, it's so gross. There's one in particular where somebody gets stabbed in the eye. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this streaming, but, in the theater, I was able to literally see, like, a chunk of the eye was still stuck on the stick that somebody had rammed into someone's face. And that was just great. I loved it. It was so gross. There's so many gory deaths and creative deaths in this, probably because there are so many deaths in general. I think it'd be a fun drinking game, actually, to take a shot every time a character dies. And you'd think that, like, considering they're in a time loop, that eventually you would just get kind of desensitized to the death. But, because they kept it so interesting and they kept the scenes so suspenseful and atmospheric, that even though I know these characters are going to come back in the next loop, it was still really, I still felt a lot of adrenaline and surprise and, all the things you're supposed to feel during a good horror film. And of course, they do kind of raise the stakes later in the film by saying that not everyone's been able to survive 13 nights, and the more nights that they, stay there, the less likely it is they're going to ever escape. So there are some stakes in the film. I think they did a good job of balancing we're in a time loop, but there's still real stakes, and it's very possible that we could die or not be able to escape this place. So I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was a lot of fun. I think it did a lot of things really successfully. There was a few lines of dialogue that were a little bit cheesy. And like I said, it kind of felt like, the phone that they brought from the outside that was able to do magical things was a little bit of a problem. I think that they could have used items they found in the world and it would have made a lot more sense. But overall, this was a really enjoyable film. It lived up to my expectations. I think that it fulfilled the promise of the premise in a way that was interesting. It had little plot twists along the way, nothing like super shocking or something that changes everything that happened before, but just little fun discoveries that they make about the time loop and the world that they've entered that kind of keep you guessing the entire time. I really enjoyed Until Dawn, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and blogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.